When we think about extinct animals, we always want to see some pictures of them, or at least a single photo. This helps us to dive deeper into its story and learn even more facts and features about its lifestyle. Yet, not all of them were recorded or had a chance to be captured on camera. That's why we have to really appreciate a chance to see pictures of some recently extinct birds, because creatures like the giant moa, host seagull, elephant bird, and many others will never have a chance to be spotted alive. In this video, we will look at the last photos of 5 recently extinct birds that I found interesting to show you. Once abundant in a restricted range, the paradise parrot was a unique bird species native to eastern Australia. Its plumage was enchantingly colorful, even by parrot standards, as it combined turquoise, aqua, scarlet, black and brown shades, giving the paradise parrot an unrepeatable coloration. The tail was almost as long as its body, which was unusual for a bird that spent most of its time on the ground despite being a rapid flyer. These beautiful parrots were observed in pairs or small family groups, and they nested in termite mounds near the ground level. There is not much available information about these magnificent birds. Even before the colonization of Australia, their population was relatively small. One of the latest studies has shown that the population size of the paradise parrot has dramatically decreased with the rise in temperature since the last glacial cycle. However, humans played a significant role in its extinction. With the colonization of Australia, settlers started clearing the territories for farming and settlements. Colonialism has significantly affected their main living area, the grassy woodlands. A severe drought in the region in 1902 may have been a significant factor in their demise. Countless paradise parrots were shot and skinned by bird collectors. They became rare towards the end of the 19th century, and by 1915 were thought to be possibly extinct. For over 20 years, no one has seen the paradise parrot again. However, in 1921, Australian naturalist Alex Chisholm rediscovered the population of these magnificent birds. This photo of the paradise parrot was taken in 1922. It's one of the few pictures that were taken before its extinction. Here we can see a wild parrot entering his nest. Unfortunately, the last confirmed sighting was in 1927, 5 years after this photo was taken. Some individuals have claimed to have seen small groups of these parrots over the next 2 decades, but no evidence has been provided. This is a tragic story, as the paradise parrot is Australia's only extinct native parrot. What an unbelievable creature has gone forever. The greater prayer chicken is an iconic North American bird that used to inhabit numerous parts of the United States, including the East Coast and the Mexican Gulf. One of the most famous aspects of these creatures is their unique and unrepeatable appearance. Male prayer chickens have orange feathers above their eyes and long feathers on the top of their head that can be raised like horns or lay flat along their neck. They also possess a circular, unfeathered neck patch that can be inflated while displaying. The greater prayer chicken has 3 subspecies. The main subspecies, which is known as the greater prayer chicken, is the most popular and abundant. However, today they inhabit only a small part of their former range, which is now restricted to the Midwest of the United States. The second subspecies, the Atwater prayer chicken, is highly endangered and restricted to the coastal part of Texas. The third subspecies was the Heath Hen, which used to inhabit the east coast of the United States and some parts of New England. Heath hens were smaller, weighing only about 2 pounds or 1 kilogram, with a more reddish plumage, grayish-brown tails, and much thicker bearing throughout the breast and sides. Because of the intense hunting and habitat loss caused by the European colonialists, the population of the East Coast declined rapidly, and by 1870 was wiped out of the mainland. The remaining population survived on the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. When the mainland population became extinct, about 300 Heath hens were still living on a tiny island. However, because of the feral cats and continued poaching, the small number halved in the next 20 years and by 1900 declined to a catastrophic 70 individuals. This low point became the last hope for saving the Heath hen. The local government became aware of its decline and decided to take some measures to protect it. In 1908, they both established a full ban on hunting the Heath hen and created a new bird reserve where they could live under the governmental protection. Thanks to the taken measures, their population has rapidly increased. Around 2,000 individuals were thriving in the Heath hen reserve by 1916, attracting tourists to observe the birds on their breeding grounds. However, everything has changed in a few months. It was a combination of bad factors that put the end of the Heath hen's history. First, a fire spread across 1/3 of the island, killing about 80% of the population. The following winter was harsh, and goshawks began expanding into the island, further reducing the Heath hen numbers. By 1927, only 11 males and 2 females remained. Despite all efforts to save the remaining population, by 1928 only 1 male survived. The endling was lovingly called the booming ban, and for another 4 years he was observed in the National Reserve searching for mates in a traditional breeding place. This is one of the last photos of the booming ban taken in the early 1930s. Unfortunately, 2 years later, he died for unknown reasons at the age of 8. Heath hens were one of the first bird species that Americans tried to save from extinction, and they almost did it, but the population was already too small and vulnerable to climatic changes and diseases. Even though it wasn't saved from extinction, the Heath hen paved the way for the conservation of other American bird species. Speaking of American birds, one of the most well-known is the passenger pigeon. They were once spread across the major part of the United States and southern Canada, with billions of birds flying in huge flocks across the country. They were known long before the arrival of the Europeans, as Native Americans witnessed their flocks for hundreds of years. They were called passenger due to their unique migratory habitats, which included a constant migration in search of food and nesting sites. The passenger pigeon was a relatively small but very fast flyer, reaching a speed of up to 100 kilometers or 62 miles per hour. Males were slightly larger than females and had a more bright coloration, with a more reddish breast and longer tail. Before Europeans colonized North America, the local population had already hunted the pigeons, but they couldn't harm a population that numbered billions of birds across thousands of kilometers. However, the hunting methods of the indigenous population were different from those of a colonial one. The French and British settlers brought a firearm with them that could kill several dozen birds with one shot. Their meat was a cheap source of protein, and their feathers were used for making pillows. Several factors contributed to their extinction, including the intense deforestation in the United States and uncontrolled hunting, as people thought they couldn't make it go extinct. The population drop was inconsistent, as from 1800 to 1870 the population was declining slowly, but in the next 20 years the numbers decreased rapidly. and passenger pigeons were rarely seen after that. The last confirmed wild bird was shot in Ohio in 1900. The last captive birds were divided into 3 groups around the turn of the 20th century, some of which were photographed alive. This is Martha, the last passenger pigeon, and her photo was taken at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. Unfortunately, she died the same year, and with her death, one of the largest bird populations in the world became extinct. The next species on the list were never numerous, and its decline was almost inevitable. The South Island snipe was formerly considered to be a subspecies of the subantarctic snipe, but later was elevated to be a full species, thanks to a fossil material from the South Island. The Maori name of this bird is tutukiwi, which probably alludes to its resemblance to a miniature kiwi bird. It was a small, richly patterned bird with a long bill, short legs, wings, and tail. With the Maori colonization of New Zealand and the associated introduction of the Pacific red, the South Island snipe became extinct on a major part of its habitat, including South Island and Stewart Island. However, they managed to survive on a tiny, nearby islands in a total isolation until the late 19th and 20th centuries. But even here, they couldn't manage to hide from outer threats. The accidental introduction of black rats and exotic predators, such as weka, made their small numbers even lower. The last confirmed sightings of these birds came from the Big South Cape and Pukaweka Islands in the early 1960s, and the South Island snipe was thought to be extinct. Yet another hope was in 1964, when workers of the Wildlife Service attempted to catch 2 males and transfer them to a safe place, but they both died in the next few days in captivity. This is the last photo of a male tutukiwi, taken right before an unsuccessful rescue attempt on August 30, 1964. Sadly, its fate was almost predetermined, as invasive species are spread across the entirety of New Zealand. I hope that its extinction plays a significant role in future conservation efforts, as many endemic birds of New Zealand are threatened to become extinct. Wake Island is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's a small atoll that played a major role during the World War II when Japanese forces attacked an important American naval and air force base. Among these geopolitical tensions lived a small and flightless rail species. At the time of its first scientific description, the birds were abundant, coexisting with other unique species inhabiting the small atoll. The Wake Island rail was a predominantly grayish-brown bird, featuring narrow white bars on its belly, breast, and flanks. Its upper throat and chin were whitish, while its bill, legs, and feet were brown. It was often seen preying on hermit crabs and digging up the seeds from the soil. Unlike the previous bird species, it was able to coexist with the Polynesian red, which was preying on its eggs. With the American expansion on the island, its nature and habitat began to change. The US government saw the island as the perfect place for the naval base, while Pan American Airways wanted to expand globally by suggesting air transfer between the United States and China. In the 1930s, they built a hotel and a seaplane port, so visitors of the island could witness the Wake Island Rail in its natural habitat. Unfortunately, that was the last years of its calm existence. When Japanese forces attacked the United States, Wake Island was one of the first places where the war began between the two major powers. Japanese forces immediately captured the island, where later thousands of Japanese troops starved because of the bad logistics until the peace agreement in 1945. The inability to fly and the geographic isolation of the island during the World War II combined with the bird's lack of fear of humans, made it an easy victim of overhunting. It's now known that the extinction occurred between 1942 and 1945. This is the last photo of the Wake Island Rail that was taken in 1936, when no one could imagine what would happen in the next 5 years with the atoll and its species. Unfortunately, the Wake Island Rail is one of the many species that became extinct because of the war actions. I want to attract more attention to this magnificent bird, as it's unrepresented in the media and scientific papers. I hope that one day we will be able to get even more information about it. Meet the Carolina parakeet, the only native parrot in the eastern United States. This genuinely unique parrot lived from tropical Florida up to snowy Canada, which is unusual for these birds, which prefer tropical or subtropical climates. The Carolina parakeet was a relatively small, green neotropical parrot with bright yellow head, reddish-orange face, and pale beak. It was around 30 centimeters or 12 inches long and weighed 280 grams or 10 ounces. What impressed me the most was their ability to inhabit various environments. It's incredible how these tropical birds established a native population deep into a temperate zone, showcasing remarkable evolutionary adaptation. What's even more interesting about these parrots is their diet. Just like other parrot species, they consumed seeds and unripe fruits of various plants. However, unlike other parrots, the Carolina parakeet consumed the toxic cocklebur seeds, which are also considered toxic for most animals and humans. There are some reports of cats known to have died after eating these birds. Fortunately, those seeds are considered crop pests, and the parakeet was seen as the primarily pest controller against them, so farmers weren't interested in destroying the parrot population. However, this doesn't apply to other humans. They remain predators. People hunted them for food, to sell their feathers, or to capture them as pets. The withdrawn lifestyle helped them avoid humans, and as late as 1896, massive fluxes were still witnessed flying across the United States. Despite being formerly widespread within its range, the Carolina parakeet had become more rare by the middle of the 19th century. The last reported sighting east of the Mississippi River, except Florida, was in 1878 in Kentucky. By the turn of the century, it was restricted to the swamps of central Florida, where the last known wild specimen was killed in 1904. This picture of the Carolina parakeet was taken in the 1900s. Here we can see the last specimen of its kind, a male named Incas, that was kept in the same cage as Martha, the last passenger pigeon. He died at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1918, at the age of at least 33 years. After many unsuccessful attempts to rediscover the bird, the Carolina parakeet was officially declared extinct in 1939. The United States would be a much more colorful place if only these magnificent birds were still flying across the sky like a rainbow, even in areas where they are not typically found. It would be fascinating to see tropical birds decorating cypresses instead of palm trees. The Hawaiian archipelago consists not only of the few islands that are clearly visible on the map. It also includes a group of smaller islands located thousands of kilometers away from the main ones. Laysan is one of them. Placed 1,500 kilometers northwest of Honolulu, it is the second largest landmass in the region, measuring only a bit more than 4 square kilometers. The island is primarily flat and consists of sand and low-level vegetation. At the center of it is the Laysan Lake, which is 3 times saltier than the surrounding ocean. The island was known for a long time, but in 1828 the Russian sailors explored the Laysan and its nature. They found and documented dozens of unique birds, including the endemic Laysan Rail. It was a small, flightless bird with a reduced tail and wings, but a well-developed legs. Its proportions were quite similar to the black rail, which occurs in both North and South America. The Laysan Rail's plumage was sandy brown with small gray patches on the head and a yellowish-green bill and feet. Despite being small, it was an aggressive bird that sometimes could fight off other species, especially the Laysan finch, its main competitor in consuming the eggs of the seabirds. The Laysan Rail had a diverse diet, consisting of plant and animal sources. Sometimes they were also witnessed eating the carcasses of dead birds. In the 1900s, the rabbits were introduced to the island, and the local birds began to decline. With no predators to control their numbers, the rabbits soon devastated the entire vegetation cover on the Laysan. By 1910, the island had turned into a barren dust bowl, immediately affecting the number of local birds. When rabbits were just introduced to the island, the number of the Laysan Rail was estimated to be around 2,000 mature birds. In 1923, an expedition came to the island to eradicate the rabbits from it. What they saw was shocking. Only 2 birds remained on the Laysan. Fortunately, they knew about the catastrophic situation with the endemic birds, so they brought 8 rails from the introduced population at the Midway Atoll in the hope of restoring the healthy population on the Laysan. Unfortunately, at least 2 of the introduced birds died immediately due to the lack of food and shelter, and the remaining 8 rails probably died by the end of 1923. The remaining population of the Laysan Rail was still surviving on the Midway Atoll, but in December 1941, the Japanese troops attacked the United States, affecting the entire Hawaiian archipelago. Unlike the Wake Island Rail that coexisted with the Polynesian rats, the Laysan Rail and the Midway Atoll have never seen them. In 1944, black rats were accidentally introduced to its living area. That was the end of the Laysan Rail. The rats quickly ate their eggs, and in 1945 no rails were found on any of the islands. This is one of the last photos of the Laysan Rail that was taken in 1923. It's an episode from a short footage taken right after introducing 8 rails to the island. Here we can see a specimen from the Midway Atoll running to explore its new home. Unfortunately, we have no footage or pictures of the remaining population from the Midway, so this footage and some other previously taken photos are everything we can look at. Today, Laysan Island suffers from a ton of garbage that the Pacific Ocean brings to its shores, making the life of the remaining birds even worse. There is no more hope to restore the Laysan Rail's population, but there is still hope to save the remaining birds from becoming extinct. Another species that suffered from the same problems was the Laysan Honeycreeper. It was first seen in 1828, the same year as the Laysan Rail. This bird species had a genuinely unique range of coloration, varying from a golden orange with brown underparts to a garnet red with black tails and side feathers. They fed primarily on nectar and built their nests in hollow patches of tall grass. Even before the catastrophic introduction of rabbits, the population of honeycreepers was never estimated to be abundant. At the time of the first scientific expedition to the island, it was already the rarest bird species. In 1903, rabbits and guinea pigs were introduced on Laysan, resulting in significant damage to the island's ecosystem. By 1911, rabbits were found everywhere, feeding on the remains of the local vegetation. However, only a few scientists paid attention to the upcoming catastrophe on Laysan Island. In 1923, only 3 honeycreepers were found, 5 days before they went extinct. This is the last picture of the Laysan Honeycreeper that was taken while recording some other bird species. Here we can see a male specimen sitting on a coral rock. Unfortunately, a few days later, Laysan was hit by a storm that killed dozens of local birds, including the remaining honeycreepers. Sadly, they weren't introduced to any other place, meaning there was no hope of its rediscovery. Between 15 and 20 million years ago, a new family of birds emerged on the islands of Hawaii. This family, the Mahadai, became known as the Hawaiian honey-eaters, representing 7 different creatures that used to inhabit various islands and ecosystems, and one of them was the Kawai ʻōʻō, the last member of its genus. It was an endemic species native to the island of Kauaʻi and is considered one of the smallest of the Hawaiian ʻōʻōs, measuring just over 20 centimeters or 8 inches in length. Its head, wings and tail were black, while the rest of its upper body was slaty brown, transitioning to rufous on the rump and flanks. The throat and breast were also black, featuring prominent white barring, especially in females. Like other honey-eaters, it had a sharp, slightly curved bill for sampling nectar. The Kawai ʻōʻō were common in the subtropical forests of the island until the early 20th century, when its decline began. Since 1934, it has been the last bird of its kind, as other species have become extinct because of the numerous factors, but deforestation and mosquito-transmitted diseases have played a key role in it. The Kawai ʻōʻō made its nests in the holes of the large trees, and as mosquitoes took over the lowland trees, the birds had to go higher in the mountains. Higher elevation forests lack tree cavities, so few, if any, nests could be made. By the early 1960s, the bird had an estimated population of about 34 living individuals, meaning they had no chance to restore the healthy amount of birds. Hurricane Iwa came in 1982 and killed the last female bird. However, the last male bird survived for 5 more years and was occasionally heard singing for a mate. Imagine how sad it is to sing for another 5 years trying to find anyone, but no one will ever hear you. Fortunately, we have a recording of it, so you can hear the last singing of this bird that was supposed to be a duet. This is one of the last photos of the Kawai ʻōʻō that was taken in 1985. Here we can see the last male bird sitting on a tree branch while searching for a mate. In 1987, he was heard for the last time. After numerous expeditions in attempts to rediscover the species, the hope of its finding was lost. In October 2023, the Kawai ʻōʻō was officially declared extinct. Located east of the African continent, Seychelles is the smallest African country, consisting of numerous islands that are hundreds of kilometers away from each other. One of these groups includes the second largest coral atoll in the world, the Aldabra atoll. It is home to numerous animals and birds, including the Aldabra giant tortoise, one of the largest tortoises in the world. However, not all of its native species made it until today, including the Aldabra bush warbler. It was considered the rarest and the most restricted bird in the world, as after its first discovery in 1967, it wasn't seen again for another 8 years. The Aldabra bush warbler was hard to spot because of its secretive nature and restricted living area, which only included the impassable jungles of the atoll. This is the only photo of this species taken right after its second discovery in 1975, when British naturalists found another 6 birds, all of which were males. However, in 1983, only 1 male was observed for the last time. The following years were spent hoping to find the new living specimens, but without any success. In 1986, the bird was confirmed to be extinct. Its disappearance remains a mystery, as the bird was seen only a few times during a short period of time. However, it is suggested that the extinction may be caused by the presence of cats, rats, and dogs, which were introduced to the atoll a long time ago. Thanks for watching the entire series about the extinct birds. I hope you enjoyed it. Here are some other videos you can watch as well.